Reuse content of blogs is the headline for the next big feature we're bringing to the Umbraco CMS backoffice. And as part of it, we're bringing a few other features. And I want to let you in on what this is all about, what it will mean for your projects and the authors of your projects. And to do that, we are going to look into the future and see how these features will take shape via some wireframes and stories that I'll bring to you right now. And the main mission that we want to cover is around reusing content. So I hope you enjoy the video, and if you have comments, opinions, or just like this type of material, then please subscribe or make comments here on this channel. So let's get started. For many years, we know that content managers have gotten used to copying content around as they needed to, and that is quite easy in the Umbraco backoffice. But keeping it consistent across multiple sources are not that easy. And that is the problem that we're looking to resolve. So to make that possible, we want to enable to create content once, use it in multiple locations, and then from there on it should always be up to date. So imagine this promotional blog that is present on multiple pages. That is fair to manage when it's only used on 2 pages, but imagining that it's used on multiple pages, a large project, that could easily become a large task to keep up to date. And one thing is carrying out the updates, but another one is doing it consistently and at last making sure that you found all the various spots to update. So our solution to this is to bring a single source of truth, and we will be calling that source an element, and we will store it in the element library. And this will be the 4th content type in Umbraco, making it documents, media, members, and now elements. So it means we're looking to introduce an element library that contains elements, and those elements will be separate pieces of content, just like any other content, but it can be referenced from anywhere. So today I would like to show you how these elements can be used to share content of a blog across multiple documents. And for that, let's step into the shoes of a content manager to explore how it will be to work with these elements via a blog editor. And at first, we'll explore how it will be to take existing content of a blog and make it reusable. And for this story, we'll look at wireframes that represent the backoffice. And right here, we have a document that has a blog editor. And if I move my cursor on top of a blog, you should now see a new action. And this action is one I can use to turn the content of this blog into a library element. And if I click on that action, I'll get a dialog with a few things that I need to consider. First, I need to give this piece of content a name, and that will be the name of this element that I'm creating. And then I will need to pick a location of where I like this element to be stored. And what you see here in the location input is the element library, and that is based on a tree structure similar to what you know from documents or media. But it's worth noticing that it consists of folders and elements. And right here, I'm only able to pick folders, and I'll pick the folder of my interest for this new element. Once I'm happy with the choices, I will click transfer, and with that, the content of this block now got transferred into an element of the library. What is worth noticing is that the content on this page did not change. I just moved the ownership of that particular block's content away from this document and into the element library. And doing this enables other documents to use it as well. When we hover the block, we can actually also see that it's now based on a library element. And this is illustrated with the link icon next to the name here in the context bar. As well, the action that I clicked before is now transformed into a break link icon, and I'll get back to that one later. If we zoom out a bit, we can compare those visuals with the type of blocks that we know from today. So right here we have a traditional local block. It has a classic blue border and no link icon next to the name, in the context bar there in the top. So if we hover back on the other element, we can see that that this one is linked, and it is a subtle indication, but once you learn this visual detail, it should become clear to you that the block is based on element. But it's also worth mentioning that it's not that it's intentional, that it's not a disturbing indication. At the end of the day, if I move my focus away from the blocks, they will all look the same, and they are the same. It's still the same content. The difference is only how it's managed. So let's have a look at how we then can reuse that content that we put into the library. So here at another document, I can add a new block, or I would like to add a new block that is based on the content that we just transferred to the library. And for that, I'll click on the Add Content button, similar to what you know today. And here in the sidebar, where we usually pick what type we want to create, we can now see a new tab called Library. And if we navigate to that one, we'll see the element library tree. And here I can navigate the folders of the element library, and I can find the element that I would like to use. Once I've found it, I can click it, and then a new block gets inserted. A block, those content is based on that element from the element library. So I transfer the block's content into an element in the element library, and then I created a new block that used that element as its content. Later we'll have a look at how you can make changes to the content of an element via a block. But first, let's have a look at where these elements end up, because they no longer live inside the documents, and they are instead located in this new section called the library. And the library is not just a hidden storage, it's actually a place to manage elements. And this section is already in development, so we can take a break away from the wireframes and the slideshow and have a look at how you can manage and utilize elements in Umbraco version 18. So right here we are in the back office running version 18, in an early version. And here I have a project that is an example of a kids wear shop that has some products. What you'll notice here, because we are in Umbraco 18, is that we now got a new section called the library. We can navigate to it, and right here we'll see the element library tree. The tree consists of folders and elements, and I can compose this as I like. I can have folders inside folders. I can also locate the elements in the root. That's up to me. In this case, I created folders for the various types of elements that I have. One of these elements are a product category. And product categories are ones that I use for the products. So let's navigate to a product here, and then we can see how the element picker is looking. So right here we have the element picker, and here we can pick other elements from the element library. So very similar to a document picker, but picking content that is not documents. It's also worth noticing, now that we're looking at the elements, that they don't have a URL. Elements are not routable, so they can only be accessed if they're referenced by something. Elements can, though, be built just like you can do with document types. You can use compositions, you can use tabs, property groups, all of that stuff. As well, Elements has a publish state, so we have a save and publish opportunity, and you can also schedule publish them. You can trash them, and you can even trash whole folders. And if you do that, you can also restore, and again you can restore the whole folder. And when you do that, the state, the published state of them will though be reset to unpublished, but you can also use bulk actions to publish them again. So that's what we have in version 18. It's maybe worth understanding that the elements are based off element types, and for an element to be able to be created in the library, we have a particular setting that needs to be turned on. So again, it's an element type, it's just like a document type, but there's a new setting at play when you have your element, your document type configured as an element type, is that you need to allow it in the library for it to be created over here. So that's one thing to notice. And regarding details, it's also worth noticing that user groups can have permissions set up for elements. So similar to what you know today for documents are also possible for elements. We can set the actions that an author is able to do, and we can even do granular permissions. So down on particular ones, we can control what an author or a user group should be able to do. So that's how it looks today in version 18, this early beta or early development of version 18. Let's get back to the slideshow. So I hope you enjoyed seeing something real that is not just wireframes, but actual things that are being developed right now. And it's worth mentioning what we just saw is going to be part of Umbraco 18, but the rest of what we're looking at will be for a future version of Umbraco. So from version 18, you'll be able to create elements, and you can utilize them in your content by using the element picker property editor. And that's it for Umbraco 18.0. Yes, so it's good to understand where those elements actually live, and it will, for most content managers, probably feel far away from their workflow. So I expect that elements used via blocks will be mainly managed from one of the documents that are using them. This will be an intuitive way for authors to navigate to a piece of content, where in comparison the library can seem distant and abstract. So let's have a look at how it will be to manage elements via a block of a document. And back here at the wireframes, we have a block the one that I created earlier. The one here is based off an element of the library. We can see that with the purple border and the link icon. Let's have a look at how you can make an update to the content of that block. And similar to any other block, we click it to edit it, and this will open up the element workspace. This is identical to what you would get when you edit the element from the library, so what we saw before. Here I can make my change to the element, and when I feel the change is good, I can find the Save and Publish button, and this will give a Save and Publish dialog similar to the one you know from documents. But we like to enhance the experience when publishing elements. So we are adding some additional information here in this dialog. And this information will emphasize the effect of this action. So we are informing you about the number of items that are referencing this element. And if you are curious about those references and like to investigate more, you can click on this button and an overview will appear in another dialog on top of the Save and Publish dialog. Here we will see all the items that reference this element. And with this information, you are getting direct knowledge of how broadly this element is being used. And in other words, that means it gives you an overview of the places that will be affected by this change. When you're okay with the scope, you can click Save and Publish. And with that, I made an update to the content of my blog here. But again, I have to emphasize, it was not just this blog that I updated, because as the dialog summarized, there are 3 other blogs using the exact same element, and they got updated as well. So that is the essence of the feature. And if that's not what you wanted, no worries, because I'll get back to how you can avoid that later. But first, let's just have a look at how you can unpublish a blog now that we're at it as well. So to unpublish a blog, I will click Edit on the blog of my interest. I will get the element workspace and I will find the Unpublish button, similar to when you're unpublishing a document. And the unpublishing dialog for elements will be very similar to the document unpublished dialog, and we will also give this one the same treatment as what we did with the Save and Publish dialog. We will highlight the number of references to this element, and if you are curious and like to investigate what those references are, you can click the overview to open up the overview similar to what we saw before. In this case, I'm happy with it, so let's go ahead and click Unpublish right away. Once an element that a blog uses is unpublished, we will see that state displayed on the blog. And that is shown by the draft tag right after the name. And as well, the name or the label will get a dimmed look. So very similar to what we know from the document tree when we have unpublished items there. So with that, I hope you got a good idea about how it will be to work with these blocks that are based on an element. But there's actually more to it than just working with the blocks themselves, because when we are publishing a document that references elements, we would actually like to improve your knowledge in that case as well. So that could be when a document are referencing an element via a block, but it could also be a document that references an element via the element picker, as we saw earlier in the live demo. So to explore how it will be to save and publish a document in the future with element references, let's click Save and Publish, and we'll see the Save and Publish dialog for a document. And we would like to extend this one as well with additional information. But this information gives a very particular insight into the document that you are about to publish, because it will highlight the referenced elements from this document. And this information is particularly relevant when you're coming from a preview session. So let's imagine an author have been previewing the document, and as well the document is containing elements, and in the preview session the author would see the latest version of everything. Therefore, you might see unpublished changes of the elements that you are using, the draft version of those elements. So this dialog reminds you about which elements that are used in this document that you might want to consider publishing as well. And the goal of it is to make you aware of what you need to do to get the same result as what you previewed, or at least be conscious about what it is you're choosing to publish. Similar to the other additional informations we showed earlier, you can click it to open up an overview, and that overview goes on top of the Save and Publish dialog. And here we get an overview of the items that are referenced. And in this case, we can see that one of them are already scheduled for publish. So in this case, I will not worry about that one. I know it's being handled next week, and I'm happy with that. But the first one on the list, I'm actually happy to publish right away. And I can do that right here from this dialog. I can click on it to open up the element workspace for that particular element. And in that case, I can then go ahead and save and publish it right here. And once I'm happy with that, I can close the element workspace to return to the overview. And what you should see here is that the overview got updated accordingly. So now there's only one item left for considerations. And in this case, I'm happy to leave the scheduled element publish itself later. So I will close this dialog, and now I feel confident and ready to publish my document. And I will do that. So now you've seen how we can transform a local block into an element or into a block based on an element from the library. We made other blocks use the same element, and we made updates to that element via the blocks. And at last you saw how the UI for publishing documents help gain confidence when you are in that case. So it can be great to have shared content across documents. It can make it easy to update across, but it can also be relevant to break that relation again and go back to basic local blocks. So let's have a look at how you can disconnect a block from the library again, with the goal of making it a local block without any connections to the element library. So right here we have the block that I inserted earlier that is based on a library element, and now I'm looking to change it. And the change that I'm looking to carry out, I'm not interested in having affecting the other places where this element is used. I want this change to be a local change. So I want to make it a local block and forget about the relation with the library element. And to make this happen, I can click the disconnect from library action. This will give me a confirm dialog. And what is important to know when carrying out this action is that it will have no effect on the element. The element from the library. This will duplicate the content of the element into this block, but it will leave the element of the library untouched. Once I click disconnect, confirm the action, then the block will become a local block with the same content as before. And that means this document is kept intact from a content perspective. Even the block is kept intact. The only difference is how we are managing the content of this particular block. Now it's a local block. It has no relation to the library, and I can safely carry out my changes without them being affecting anything else. So if you like to make a block available for others, you can transfer it to the library, and once it's there, it can be used across the project. But once there is a need to deviate, you can choose to disconnect it again. And once it's disconnected, local changes can be made. And if you later like to share that new particular version with others, you can again transfer it to the library, making it available as a new element in the library. So authors have the ability to decide what should be centrally controlled from the library and what should be unique to the document. So maybe you already have great experience with the block editors, and maybe you then thought about how does the block settings fit into all of this. So let's have a look at that. So if your block type has a settings model, it will still be available via the settings action. So it will stay identical to what you know from today, and it's illustrated by this cogwheel action right here on the block. And we can click on it, and when you then edit those settings, there's one noticeable difference. You can no longer jump between the content and the settings model. So let's open up the content part of the block just to view it from a different angle. What you're seeing here is the element workspace, and you cannot navigate to the settings. And the reason they are disconnected is because their scopes are fundamentally different. The content has multiple usages, in this case where it's an element, right? And the settings are local to each usage. If we kept those closer together, we would have authors that would misunderstand the scope of the changes. And to understand that aspect, let's imagine, let's try to see how it will be if we were carrying out a change to the settings. So because settings are local, they are submitted as part of the document. They are part of the document data and will be published together with the document. And this is completely different from how changes to an element will be carried out. Changes to an element do not rely on the document to be published. Elements have their own flow and are published individually. So the important difference between content and settings is who owns the data. And since those are two different sources, the back office will underline that story by keeping them visually apart. And at this point, you may be asking, why are they different, and why can't we have the whole block shared across our documents? And for that, I would like to explain why we are heading this direction and why we think it is great that content is shared and settings are local. And for that story, I'll bring back the example of the promotional block from the beginning. So again, here we have two use cases of the same content next to each other. And the content of these two blocks are identical. The front-end code for this is responsive, but the data is the same. And though responsive and adaptive code is the ideal way to render your data, that may not be fit for all projects. In this case, the project has a very vibrant style, and to support that look and feel, we need to enable authors to vary the color theme of each component. So for this, I decided to add some stylistic options in the settings model for this block type. So let's have a look at how these settings could work for this promotional block. In this case, I went with a theme picker, so not picking individual colors. So what you know from block editors today, your settings can contain all sorts of properties. So I could have used color pickers and provide sizing options, layout options, even the ability to pick a custom background image. but I would always strive to keep those options as simple as possible. A positive effect of doing that is that the concrete design choices will be made in the code implementation and can thereby be adjusted later, and we can secure our design as being consistent across. I also like to highly recommend, when we are making implementations of our settings, or the implementations that are using the data from settings, should have good defaults. They should provide good default values, enabling authors not to enter the settings, so we can leave the settings untouched. For this left side block, I will leave it with the defaults. So let's close it again, but I would like to customize the one on the right side. So I will open up the settings for that one. So for this one, I want to set a specific color theme. I'll just pick this one, and when I'm happy with the choice, I will submit the settings. In this way, authors can tailor the looks for a particular location. So because the block settings are local, they can be used to adjust or specify the content for that particular use case. But let me emphasize, we should avoid forcing authors into settings. So ideally, they only need to navigate here if they have something they need to customize. So don't add mandatory fields in settings, and make sure that there are good defaults for the settings in your implementation. But despite that, settings can be anything that you like to have defined locally. And it doesn't need to be stylistic. It can be technical things as well, like a tracking ID or additional queries for the content. So make the block settings what you want them to be. Use them for what makes sense in your project. Just keep in mind that the settings are local, so do carefully consider where you're locating your properties. So let's wrap up with a short summary. So in near future, blocks can have their content abstracted away from the particular document. And that will make it content on its own, existing as an element in the library. And what that enables is that other blocks can then reuse that same content. But it could also be picked directly via the element picker property editor. So notice an element is not limited to a particular type of relationship. Once it's in the library, it can be used by anyone. And it's neither limited to a document element relation. Elements can also be used by medias or members, even other elements. So you can create enormously complex structures. And that is not something I think you should strive for, but it's worth understanding the flexibility that you have at hand. At the end of the day, this feature will be very similar to having documents that reference other documents. The important difference lies in the UX that we are providing for authors, the awareness of the relationship, whether that's working with the elements or a document that has references to them. So a lot of this feature is all about helping authors manage abstracted content to ease the complexity that is at hand. And it's features like this one that I'm referencing to. So I hope that gave you a good idea about how the future will be, how it will be to work with content that is reused across multiple documents. And I hope it gave you a good idea about how it will take form and what use cases it will be fit for. Also, what use cases it won't be fit for. And no matter whether this feature fits your needs or not, then please write a comment about what you think and how it fits for your projects. Maybe as well you have other ideas or considerations. I would like to know about them. So thank you for watching. Thank you for collaborating and thank you for contributing. And yeah, have a great day.